The blood came first, 3 drops on white marble. Then the hand that caught her before she hit the stone steps. And finally, the voice that made every merchant in the square fall silent. This one is mine. Wait, before the next revelation happens. If this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To make sure you don't miss any unexpected alliances or awakened powers, subscribe and join our circle. The game is about to change. Now, back to the scene. Ilara's mother had already vanished into the morning fog before the stranger's declaration finished echoing through the marketplace. The child, barely 5 years old, with tangled black hair and eyes too old for her face, stared up at the man who'd prevented her fall. His skin was alabaster in the dawn light, his clothes finer than anything she'd seen in her short, brutal life. Behind him stood 6 others, equally pale, equally still, watching the crowd with the patient hunger of predators deciding whether to feed. Lord Cassian, the market master, stammered, dropping to one knee. Around him, vendors and early customers followed suit, pressing foreheads to the dirt. "We didn't know you'd be visiting the lower quarter today. If we'd known, you'd have hidden your refuse more carefully." Cassian's voice carried no warmth, though his hand remained gentle on Ilara's shoulder. "Tell me, how many children have been abandoned on these steps this year?" The market master's silence was answer enough. Ilara didn't understand why everyone feared this beautiful man, but she understood abandonment. Her mother's last words still rang in her ears. "You're nothing but a burden, girl. Maybe someone will take pity on you. Maybe you'll die. Either way, you're not mine anymore." The words had been delivered without anger, without sadness, just a flat acceptance of what poverty demanded. "Stand up, child," Cassian said, and Ilara obeyed despite her trembling legs. He studied her with eyes that shifted from gray to silver in the strengthening light. "You're bleeding." She'd scraped her palms when she stumbled, trying to chase after her mother's retreating figure. The blood was nothing. She'd had worse. But Cassian stared at those 3 red drops on the marble as if they were diamonds. "She has the scent," one of his companions murmured, a woman with copper hair braided into a crown. "Cassian, you can't possibly—" "Can't I?" He didn't look away from Ilara. "What's your name?" "Ilara." Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "Ilara." He repeated it like a prayer or a verdict. "Do you know what I am?" She shook her head, though instinct whispered warnings her conscious mind couldn't articulate. "I am the Alpha of the Northern Covenant, the oldest of my kind in this realm. And I've just decided to become your guardian." His smile revealed teeth that were slightly too sharp. "You'll come with me to Thornwood Manor. You'll be clothed, fed, educated. You'll want for nothing." "Why?" The question escaped before caution could stop it. Cassian's smile widened. "Because you're special, little Ilara. Your blood calls to powers you don't yet understand. And because I'm curious to see what you'll become." The copper-haired woman, Mira, Ilara would later learn, stepped forward. "The council will never approve. A human child in Thornwood? A potential bloodling? Cassian, think of the politics." "The council," Cassian said softly, "does not dictate my choices. They may advise, may protest, may plot, but they do not command me." He extended his hand to Ilara. "What do you say, child? Will you trust a monster to raise you?" Ilara looked at his offered hand, then back at the crowd of kneeling humans who'd watched her mother walk away without a word of protest. She thought of the cold nights sleeping in doorways, the hunger that gnawed like a living thing, the beatings from shop owners who didn't want her filth near their goods. She placed her small, bloody hand in his cold, pale one. "Wise girl," Cassian murmured. Then, to his companions, "We return to Thornwood. Prepare the eastern wing. Our newest resident will need accommodations." The journey from the lower market to the vampire quarter took less than an hour, but it crossed worlds. The cramped, sewage-stained streets gave way to broad avenues lined with ancient trees. The ramshackle wooden structures transformed into stone mansions with gardens that bloomed even in early spring. And the people became fewer, paler, moving with the peculiar grace of beings who'd forgotten what it meant to hurry. Thornwood Manor rose like a crown jewel among treasures, a Gothic masterpiece of black stone and stained glass, surrounded by walls that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Guards stood at the gates, their eyes tracking Alara's approach with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. "The Alpha brings home a pet," one muttered, too quiet for human ears, but perfectly audible to vampires. Cassian's head turned fractionally. The guard paled further, an impressive feat, and stared at his boots. Inside, the manor was a labyrinth of wealth and shadow. Tapestries depicting ancient battles lined the halls. Chandeliers of crystal and silver cast dancing lights across marble floors. And everywhere, the inhabitants of Thornwood watched Alara pass with the same predatory interest. "Your rooms," Cassian said, opening a door to reveal a suite larger than any building Alara had ever entered. A four-poster bed dominated the space, draped in silk the color of midnight. Bookshelves lined one wall. A fireplace large enough to stand in occupied another. Windows overlooked gardens that seemed to glow with their own luminescence. "This is mine?" Alara whispered. "This is yours." Cassian knelt to her level, bringing his ancient eyes even with her young ones. "But understand this, Alara. Thornwood is not the human world. We have rules here, laws that govern our kind. You'll learn them, you'll respect them, and you'll never forget what I am, what all of us are." "Monsters?" She remembered his own word. "Vampires," he corrected. "The distinction matters. Monsters act without thought. We act with perfect clarity." He touched her cheek with one cold finger. "Sleep now. Tomorrow your education begins." He left her then, alone in luxury she couldn't comprehend. Alara climbed onto the bed, so soft it felt like sleeping on clouds, and pulled the silk covers up to her chin. Through the windows, she watched night claim the gardens, transforming them from eerily beautiful to hauntingly otherworldly. She should have been afraid. Every instinct screamed that she'd traded one form of danger for another, that the cold hand and sharp teeth promised nothing good. But for the first time in her short life, Alara felt chosen. Not abandoned, not tolerated, not ignored. Chosen. The alpha vampire, the most powerful creature in the northern realm, had looked at her blood on marble and decided she mattered. She fell asleep wondering what that would cost. The next 13 years would answer that question in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. Morning came too early and too gently. A servant with kind eyes and pointed ears drew back curtains, allowing spring sunlight to flood the room. Alara jerked awake, momentarily disoriented by the softness beneath her, the clean scent of lavender, the absence of cold and hunger. "Peace, little one," the servant said. Her voice carried an accent Ilara couldn't place. "I'm Helene. I've brought breakfast and clothes for you. Lord Cassian requests your presence in the library at noon." The breakfast was impossible. Fresh bread still warm from the oven, butter that melted into golden pools, strawberry preserves, cream so thick it coated her spoon, sliced apples arranged like flowers. Ilara ate until her stomach ached, unable to stop despite discomfort. Who knew when such plenty would come again? The clothes Helene laid out were equally bewildering. A dress of deep green velvet with silver embroidery at the cuffs and collar, soft leather shoes that actually fit, undergarments of fabric finer than anything she'd ever touched. When Helene helped her dress and guided her to a mirror, Ilara barely recognized the child staring back. "You'll do," Helene said with satisfaction, "though we'll need to work on your hair, perhaps after you meet with his lordship." The library proved even more imposing than her room. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves created corridors of knowledge, each volume bound in leather and stamped with gold. A desk of dark wood dominated the center, and behind it sat Cassian, looking exactly as he had the previous day, unchanging, eternal, terrifying in his beauty. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing to a chair across from him. Ilara obeyed, perching on the edge of the seat like a bird ready to flee. "You're wondering why I chose you," Cassian said without preamble. "The answer is complex, but I'll give you the simple version. Your bloodline carries a rare genetic marker, one that appears perhaps once in 10,000 births. It makes your blood attractive to vampires, yes, but more than that. It makes you capable of surviving the transformation, should you ever choose it." "Transformation?" Ilara's voice cracked. "Into one of us." He leaned back, studying her reaction. "Don't worry, such a choice is decades away, if it ever comes at all. For now, you're simply a ward of Thornwood, under my protection. But that protection comes with obligations." "What obligations?" "Education first. You'll learn to read, write, calculate. You'll study history, politics, the delicate balance of power between vampire courts and human kingdoms. You'll train your body. We may be your guardians, but you must be capable of defending yourself against those who see you as prey or pawn." His fingers drummed against the desk, the only sign of something resembling uncertainty. "And you'll learn our laws. Break them, and not even I can save you." "Why would I break them if I don't know what they are?" His smile was genuine this time. "Clever girl. Very well, your first lesson. The most important law: never reveal vampire existence to humans who don't already know. The second: never feed from an unwilling victim. The third: respect the hierarchy of power within a covenant. There are others, nuances and protocols, but those three will keep you alive." "But I'm human," Ilara pointed out. "I don't feed from anyone." "Not yet, but you'll live among those who do, and you'll be judged by association." Cassian rose, moving to a bookshelf with fluid grace. He pulled down a slim volume and placed it before her. "Start with this. It's a history of the Northern Covenant, written in simple language. By week's end, I expect you to tell me about the founding and the first territorial wars." Ilara stared at the book. The letters on the cover meant nothing. She'd never learned to read. I don't know how," she admitted, shame burning her cheeks. Cassian's expression softened fractionally. "Then that's where we begin. Helene will assist you. She's patient and thorough. In a year, you'll be reading without difficulty. In 5, you'll be reading texts in multiple languages. In 10, He paused, something unreadable crossing his features. In 10 years, we'll see what you've become. He dismissed her then, and Helene appeared to guide her to a smaller study where the patient instruction began. Letters first, their shapes and sounds, then simple words, built carefully like tiny houses of meaning. Ilara discovered she had a hunger for learning that matched her hunger for food. Each new word felt like power, like armor against a world that had tried to discard her. Days became weeks, weeks became months. The manor's rhythms became familiar, dawn rising with Helene's gentle wake-up call, morning lessons in reading and mathematics, afternoon sessions on history and politics, evening meals in her room. Vampires didn't eat, and dining halls were spaces of negotiation and power plays she couldn't yet navigate. And nights when the manor truly came alive with sounds she learned not to investigate. She saw Cassian rarely in those early months. Glimpses in corridors, brief conversations in the library, occasional moments when he'd materialize to correct her understanding of vampire politics or clarify a historical point. He was present without being present, a guardian who kept his distance while somehow knowing everything about her progress. Other vampires were less subtle in their attention. Mira, the copper-haired woman from that first day, became a frequent visitor to Ilara's studies. She'd appear without announcement, settling into a chair to observe lessons with critical eyes. "She's progressing too slowly," Mira told Helene during one such visit. "At this rate, she won't be ready for—" "Ready for what?" Ilara interrupted, surprising herself. Mira's eyes fixed on her, sharp as cut glass. "To understand the world you've entered, child. Cassian may be content to let you grow slowly, but others in Thornwood are less patient. They wonder what you are, what you'll become. Some see you as a future asset. Others see you as a liability to be eliminated before you become a problem." "Mira," Helene said warningly. She should know the truth. Mira leaned forward. "You're not a pet, Ilara, and this isn't a fairy tale. Cassian saved you from one form of death, but delivered you to another kind of danger. The only question is whether you'll be strong enough to survive it." The words haunted Ilara long after Mira left. That night, unable to sleep, she did something she'd been explicitly warned against. She left her room after midnight and wandered the manor's corridors. Thornwood transformed after dark. The shadows seemed alive, whispering in languages she couldn't understand. Candlelight flickered in rhythms that defied natural law. And from behind closed doors came sounds, laughter, arguments, the occasional scream that cut off too quickly. She found herself in a wing she'd never explored, drawn by music that seemed to bypass her ears and resonate directly in her bones. A door stood ajar, revealing a ballroom where dozens of vampires moved in complex dances. They wore clothes from different eras, different cultures, creating a tapestry of immortal fashion. And in the center, commanding the space like a dark sun, Cassian danced with a woman whose beauty made Ilara's breath catch. The woman had hair like spun gold and eyes like emeralds. When she laughed, everyone in the room responded as if pulled by invisible strings. And when she pressed close to Cassian, whispering something in his ear, Ilara felt a strange twist in her stomach. Something she was too young to name, but old enough to feel. "You shouldn't be here." Ilara spun to find a boy, or something shaped like a boy, watching her from the shadows. He looked perhaps 16, with dark hair that fell across eyes the color of old blood. Unlike the other vampires, he wore simple clothes, dark trousers, a white shirt, boots meant for function rather than fashion. "I'm sorry," Ilara stammered. "I couldn't sleep, and I heard—" "The music," he nodded, understanding. It calls to those with the gift. I'm Dante. You're the Alpha's human. I'm Alara, and I'm not anyone's anything. Dante's smile revealed fangs. Brave words. Foolish but brave. Come. If the Alpha finds you wandering, there will be consequences. I'll take you back to your room. He moved like water through the corridors, somehow knowing which turns to take, which doors to avoid. Alara hurried to keep up, questions bubbling up despite her fear. Who was that woman? The one dancing with Lord Cassian? Lady Seraphine. She's the head of the Eastern Covenant, our most powerful ally and greatest threat. She and Cassian have been playing their games for 3 centuries. Sometimes they're lovers, sometimes they're enemies. Always, they're dangerous to each other. Why is she here? Politics, treaties, the delicate balance of power that keeps our kind from tearing each other apart. Dante stopped at her door. A word of advice, Alara. Don't let your attachment to the Alpha grow beyond gratitude. He saved you, yes, but vampires don't love the way humans do. We possess, we desire, we claim, but love? He shook his head. That's a weakness we can't afford. He left her then, melting back into shadows, and Alara stood alone in her doorway, listening to the distant music and wondering what exactly she'd been chosen for. The next morning, Cassian summoned her to his study. He sat behind his desk, expression unreadable, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "You wandered last night," he said without preamble, against explicit instructions. "How did you?" "I know everything that happens in Thornwood." His eyes fixed on hers, silver boring into brown. The question is why? Rebellion? Curiosity? Or testing the boundaries of my patience? Alara chose honesty. "I heard music. I wanted to understand this world you've brought me into. And that Lady Seraphine is beautiful. That you've known her for centuries. That vampires play games with each other that I can't begin to understand. And that I don't know my place here. Am I a ward? A prisoner? A future vampire? A pet, like everyone keeps calling me?" Her voice rose despite her attempt at control. "You saved me, Lord Cassian, and I'm grateful, but what am I being saved for?" Silence stretched between them, broken only by the ticking of an antique clock. Then Cassian did something unexpected. He laughed, a sound both warm and terrible. "You're 8 years old and already asking the questions that matter." He rose, moving to the window. "Very well. I'll tell you a truth, Alara. 15 years ago, a seer came to Thornwood. She spoke of a child born under a blood moon, abandoned at the place where earth meets commerce, carrying a bloodline that could shift the balance of power between courts. She said this child would either unite the covens or destroy them, depending on who claimed her first." Alara's heart hammered. "Me?" "You. Born during a lunar eclipse, a blood moon, as vampires call it, abandoned at the market steps where earth and commerce meet, carrying the rare marker that makes transformation possible without death." He turned back to her. "I claimed you first, Alara. But Lady Seraphine knows the prophecy too, as does the Western Court, as do the vampire hunters who see you as an abomination waiting to happen." "So she struggled to wrap her mind around it. "I'm some kind of weapon." "You're a possibility," Cassian corrected. "What you become, that's still unwritten. But yes, others will see you as a weapon, a tool, a prize to be won or eliminated. That's why your education matters. That's why you need to understand our world, our politics, our power structures. You need to be strong enough to survive what's coming." "What is coming?" "War," he said simply. "Not tomorrow, not next year, but eventually. The peace between covens is fragile, maintained through carefully balanced alliances and mutually assured destruction. A child of prophecy raised by the Northern Alpha who could be turned into a vampire of immense power? He shook his head. That shifts the balance. Others will move against you, against me, against Thornwood itself. And when they do, you'll need to be ready. Elara absorbed this, the weight of destiny settling on shoulders too young to bear it. Why are you telling me this now? Because you asked. Because you went looking for truth instead of accepting comfortable lies. And because you need to understand what I'm asking of you. Cassian approached, kneeling again to bring himself level with her. I'm asking you to trust me, Elara, to let me prepare you for what's ahead, to study hard, train hard, grow strong. Can you do that? She thought of her mother's retreating back, the cold streets, the hunger and fear. She thought of this warm room, these full meals, these books that opened worlds. She thought of prophecies and wars, and a future written in blood she didn't yet understand. I can, she said. I will. Good. He stood, dismissing her with a gesture. Return to your lessons. And, Elara, don't wander at night again. Next time, I might not be able to protect you from what you find. The years that followed proved Cassian's words prophetic. Elara grew, not just in body, but in knowledge and capability. By age 12, she could read Latin, Greek, and the Old Vampire tongue. By 14, she could best Helene at chess and hold her own in debates with Mira about covenant politics. By 16, she'd begun physical training with Dante, who'd somehow become her unlikely friend and fierce instructor. Again, Dante commanded, watching as Elara picked herself up from the training room floor for the dozenth time that morning. You're telegraphing your moves. A vampire will read your intentions before you even begin to act. Maybe if you fought at human speed, I'd stand a chance, Elara panted, wiping sweat from her eyes. And maybe if attackers announce themselves politely, but they won't. Now, again. She launched herself at him, feinting left, then striking right, using the momentum of her smaller body to try and unbalance his larger frame. Dante caught her wrist, spun her, and had her pinned in seconds. Better, he admitted, releasing her. You're learning to think like a predator instead of prey. A few more years and you might actually be dangerous. To you? He laughed. To me, never. But to humans? To younger vampires? Perhaps. His expression sobered. You're 18 next month, Elara. That's significant. Why? Because that's when you legally become an adult by both human and vampire law, which means you're no longer protected by childhood immunity. If someone wants you dead, they can act without violating the treaty prohibitions against harming children. The words sent ice through Elara's veins. Has someone expressed intent to several someones? The Western Court sent an envoy last month suggesting that your continued existence is destabilizing. The hunters have been spotted in the lower quarter asking questions about you. And Lady Seraphine, Dante trailed off, uncertain. What about her? She's been visiting more frequently, bringing gifts, making overtures to Cassian about an alliance. Everyone thinks she wants you for herself, either as a bargaining chip or as a weapon against the Western Court. Elara thought of the golden-haired vampire she'd seen dancing with Cassian a decade ago. Since then, she'd encountered Seraphine dozens of times. Always cordial, always curious, always watching Elara with the same intensity a jeweler might examine a precious stone. What does Lord Cassian say? Nothing. Which is the problem? Dante helped her to her feet. Look, Elara, I probably shouldn't say this, but you deserve honesty. Cassian's protection won't last forever. Eventually, you'll have to choose. Transform and join us as a vampire, or leave Thornwood and make your own way in the human world. Either choice comes with massive risks. And if I choose neither, that's not an option. Prophecy doesn't allow for neutrality. The conversation haunted Ilara through her 18th birthday, which Cassian marked with a formal dinner, her first time in the main hall, surrounded by dozens of vampires who watched her like a fascinating specimen. Seraphine attended, resplendent in crimson silk, presenting Ilara with an antique dagger whose handle was worked with silver and moonstone. "For protection," Seraphine said, her voice honey over steel. "Every woman should know how to defend her honor." "Thank you, Lady Seraphine." Ilara accepted the weapon, feeling its perfect balance. "It's beautiful. As are you." Seraphine's eyes traveled over Ilara's face, lingering on features that had refined with age. "You've grown into quite the young woman. Cassian must be proud." "I am," Cassian interjected smoothly, appearing at Ilara's side. "Though pride is perhaps too human an emotion for creatures like us." "Speak for yourself, darling." Seraphine smiled, all teeth. "I take great pride in my achievements and my collections." The threat, veiled but unmistakable, hung in the air. Cassian's hand settled on Ilara's shoulder, a gesture of possession more than comfort. "Ilara is under my protection," he said quietly. "That hasn't changed." "Everything changes, Cassian. Even you should remember that." Seraphine's smile never wavered as she drifted away, leaving a wake of whispers among the assembled vampires. Later, after the dinner had dissolved into small conversations and political maneuvering, Ilara found Cassian in his study, staring at maps that showed Covenant territories across the continent. "She wants me," Ilara said without preamble. "Not for an alliance, she wants to claim me herself." "Yes, no point in denying the obvious. Why don't you just let her? It would solve problems, wouldn't it? Create peace between the Northern and Eastern Covenants? Remove me as a source of tension?" Cassian's laugh was bitter. "You think Seraphine wants you for peace? She wants you because the prophecy says you'll be powerful, and power is the only thing she values. She'd transform you, bind you with blood magic, and use you as a weapon against every covenant that opposes her expansion, including mine." "And what do you want me for?" The question she'd been holding back for 13 years finally emerged, raw and desperate. Cassian turned to face her, and for the first time, she saw something like vulnerability in his ancient eyes. "I want you to have a choice," he said. "That's all I've ever wanted. To give you time to grow, to learn, to become strong enough to decide your own fate. But the world is running out of patience, Ilara. Soon, you'll have to choose. Transform, flee, or fight. And whichever you choose, I'll stand with you." "Why?" "Because 13 years ago, I watched a child bleed on marble steps, abandoned by her own mother, and I saw something in her eyes, a refusal to surrender, even in the face of absolute despair. That same look is in your eyes now, and I'm curious, as I was then, to see what you'll become when you stop being afraid and start being dangerous." He moved closer, his hand cupping her face with surprising gentleness. "You're not a pet, Ilara. You're not a weapon. You're a young woman with more potential than any vampire I've encountered in 5 centuries of existence. And yes, that terrifies me, because He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "Attached, which is foolish, which is dangerous, but which is, apparently, unavoidable." Ilara's heart hammered as she recognized the truth she'd been denying for years. She loved him. Not as a ward loved a guardian, not as a student loved a teacher. She loved him with the desperate, consuming intensity of someone who'd never had anything precious until him. Cassian, don't. He released her, stepping back. Don't speak what we both know. You're 18. I'm 543. This attraction between us is inevitable, given proximity and intensity, but it can't be acted upon. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. Why not? Because I refuse to bind you to me through transformation, and that's the only way we could truly be together. As a human, you'll age and die. As a vampire, you'd be eternally young, but eternally bound to your sire through blood magic. I won't do that to you, Ilara. I won't take your freedom in the name of love. The word hung between them. Love, said and unsaid, acknowledged and denied. Then what happens now? Ilara asked, voice breaking. Now you continue your training. You grow stronger. And when the war comes, and it will come, Seraphine's visit tonight was a declaration of intent. You decide what you're willing to fight for. He left her then, alone in a study filled with maps of territories and power, and Ilara understood that she'd reached a crossroads. Every choice ahead carried consequences she couldn't fully imagine. But for the first time since her mother left her on those marble steps, she had the power to choose her own path. The question was whether she'd have the courage to walk it. 3 months passed in preparation for a war everyone knew was coming, but no one wanted to name. Ilara trained with increased intensity. Combat with Dante, strategy with Mira, political theory with Helene, and occasional quiet evenings in the library with Cassian, discussing everything and nothing while carefully avoiding the tension that crackled between them. The peace shattered on a moonless night in autumn. Ilara woke to the sound of breaking glass and screaming. She grabbed the dagger Seraphine had given her, ironic weapon to defend against its giver, and emerged into corridors filled with smoke and blood. Vampires fought each other with savage grace, blurs of motion too fast for human eyes to track. Ilara! Dante materialized from the chaos, blood streaming from a wound on his temple. Seraphine's forces have breached the walls. She's demanding you be handed over or Thornwood burns. Cassian's holding the main hall, but we're outnumbered 3-1. Where's Mira, Helene? Mira's fighting in the East Wing. Helene's securing the younger vampires in the crypts. But Ilara, listen, there's a passage beneath your room that leads to the forest. You can escape while there's still time. And leave everyone to die for me? The thought was repellent. No, you don't have a choice. Dante gripped her shoulders. You're what this fight is about. If you're not here, there's no reason for the battle to continue. There's every reason. Cassian's voice cut through the noise. He emerged from the smoke, clothes torn, face spattered with blood not his own. Seraphine isn't here for Ilara alone. She's here to destroy the Northern Covenant's power, to eliminate me as a rival, and to claim dominion over the entire territory. Whether Ilara escapes or not, this fight ends with Thornwood standing or falling. Then let me fight, Ilara said. No. Both Cassian and Dante spoke in unison. I'm not a child anymore. Ilara raised the dagger. I've trained for this. I can help. You'll be killed in seconds, Cassian said flatly. Vampire combat isn't something humans can survive. An explosion rocked the manor, sending them all sprawling. Through the smoke walked Seraphine, flanked by a dozen of her deadliest warriors. She looked untouched by battle, her golden hair perfect, her emerald eyes bright with triumph. Really, Cassian, is this the best you can offer? I expected more resistance from the great Northern Alpha. Her gaze found Ilara, and her smile widened. There's my prize. Hello, darling. Did you like the dagger? I do hope you're not planning to use it against me. It would be such a waste of good silver. Stand down, Seraphine. Cassian moved between her and Ilara. This doesn't have to end in bloodshed. But it does. That's the delicious part. Seraphine's laugh was crystalline, mad. You see, the prophecy never specified which covenant would claim the child of power. You assumed you'd have years to prepare her, to bind her to you through loyalty and affection. But I've been more practical. I've secured alliances with the Western Court, the Southern Syndicate, and even the Vampire Hunters. All of them promised various considerations in exchange for supporting my claim to Ilara. The Hunters? Mira appeared from a side corridor, bleeding from a dozen wounds. You've allied with Vampire Hunters? Necessary sacrifices. They get to eliminate a few targets they've had their eyes on. I get a clear path to Ilara. Everyone wins. Seraphine's eyes never left Cassian. Except you, darling. You lose your covenant, your territory, and your precious ward. Unless, of course, you want to negotiate. What terms? Simple. You give me Ilara willingly. I'll transform her tonight, bind her to me as sire. And in exchange, I'll spare Thornwood. Your vampires can continue to exist under my authority. You can even maintain a ceremonial title if your pride demands it. But the power shifts to me. Never, Cassian said. Then you all die. Seraphine gestured, and her warriors advanced. What happened next occurred in heartbeats. Dante launching himself at the nearest warrior, Mira conjuring defensive magic that filled the corridor with blistering light, Cassian moving with speed that made him nearly invisible as he engaged Seraphine directly. And Ilara, standing in the center of the chaos, realized the truth. As long as she was the prize, the fighting would never stop. She made her choice. Stop! Her voice shouldn't have carried over the sounds of combat, but somehow it did. Every vampire in the corridor froze, turning to stare at her. Stop fighting. I'll go with Lady Seraphine voluntarily. Ilara, no! Cassian started. Under one condition, Ilara continued, raising her voice over the resumed murmurs. You let everyone in Thornwood live. No retribution, no subjugation. They remain free and autonomous. Seraphine's eyes glittered with interest. And why would I agree to that? Because if you don't, I'll use this dagger on myself right now. The prophecy requires me alive to be of any use. Dead, I'm worthless to you. You'll have destroyed Thornwood for nothing. The blade pressed against her own throat, sharp enough that a thin line of blood appeared. Every vampire in the corridor inhaled sharply. Her blood, that rare, intoxicating scent that had drawn Cassian to her 13 years ago, now weaponized as leverage. You're bluffing, Seraphine said, but uncertainty flickered across her face. Am I? You said it yourself. I've been raised by Cassian. He taught me that freedom matters more than life, that some cages are worse than death. Ilara's hand didn't shake. So yes, Lady Seraphine, I'll go with you. I'll let you transform me, but only if Thornwood stands free. Otherwise, you get nothing but a corpse and a failed prophecy. Silence stretched impossibly long. Then Seraphine laughed, genuine delight in the sound. Oh, you magnificent creature! Cassian, you've raised her well, too well for your own good. She waved her warriors back. Very well, Ilara, I accept your terms. Thornwood remains autonomous. Your friends live. And you come with me tonight for the transformation. No. Cassian's voice was raw. Ilara, you don't understand what you're agreeing to. The sire bond, it's not slavery, but it's close. You'll be compelled to obey her, to serve her interests, to survive, Elara interrupted, meeting his eyes. And to keep everyone I love alive. That's enough. She saw the moment his heart broke. If vampires had hearts, if creatures who'd lived centuries could still feel that particular agony. He'd spent 13 years protecting her, preparing her, trying to give her the freedom to choose. And she was choosing to surrender it. There must be another way, he whispered. There isn't. You know it as well as I do. Elara lowered the dagger, but kept it visible, a reminder of her threat. Lady Seraphine gets what she wants. You get to keep Thornwood. And I. She managed a smile. I get to not be responsible for everyone's deaths. It's the best ending available. Seraphine moved forward, extending her hand. Come then, child of prophecy. Let's see what you become under my guidance. Elara took one last look at Cassian, memorizing the silver of his eyes, the elegant lines of his face, the way he stood like a statue of grief made flesh. Then she placed her hand in Seraphine's cold grip and let herself be led away. The transformation chamber was deep beneath Seraphine's estate, a Gothic cathedral of a room with vaulted ceilings and walls carved with ancient symbols. A marble altar dominated the center, stained with the blood of countless previous transformations. Lie down, Seraphine commanded, and Elara obeyed, the cold stone beneath her back leaching warmth from her body. This will hurt, Seraphine said conversationally, leaning over her. More than anything you've experienced. Your human body will die, and something new will be born from the corpse. Most don't survive. The mortality rate for transformations is approximately 40%. But you have the marker, the rare bloodline. You'll survive. The question is what you'll be when you wake. Will I remember them? Cassian, Dante, Mira? Oh yes. Memory survives transformation. It's one of the cruelties of our existence. We remember every moment of our human lives, every person we loved, every warmth we can never feel again. Seraphine's fangs extended. Ready? Elara wasn't, could never be, but she nodded anyway. The first bite was lightning and ice. Seraphine's fangs pierced the major artery in Elara's throat, and venom flooded her system. Her body convulsed, back arching off the altar, every nerve screaming. She felt her heartbeat accelerate, then stutter, then slow to an impossible crawl. Don't fight it, Seraphine murmured against her neck. Let the old self die. Welcome the new. But Elara did fight, not against the transformation itself, but against the compulsion she felt building. The sire bond, attempting to root itself in her mind, to make Seraphine's will her own. She fought with every scrap of stubbornness Cassian had cultivated, every lesson about freedom and choice, every memory of being discarded and deciding she mattered anyway. The pain intensified until Elara was sure she'd gone mad, that her mind had shattered under the assault. She screamed, or tried to. Her throat was too full of venom and blood to make sound. Darkness crept in from the edges of her vision, promising relief, promising oblivion. She almost surrendered to it. Then, in the deepest part of that darkness, she heard Cassian's voice. A memory, a ghost, a lifeline. You're not a pet. You're not a weapon. You're a young woman with more potential than any vampire I've encountered in 5 centuries. Elara grabbed that memory like a rope and pulled. She woke to a world transformed. Colors were more vivid, sounds more distinct. She could hear Seraphine's breathing across the room, could smell the particular blend of perfume and ancient blood that marked her, and she could feel the sire bond, a pull toward obedience, toward subservience, toward making Seraphine's desires her own. But the bond was weaker than it should have been, attenuated, as if something in Ilara had resisted the full connection. Interesting, Seraphine mused, studying her. You're awake faster than most, and your eyes, they're not the typical red of new vampires. They're violet. I've never seen that before. Ilara sat up slowly, testing her new body. Everything felt sharper, stronger, more. She was aware of her own muscles in ways she'd never been as a human, could feel the potential for speed and strength coiled beneath her skin. "How do you feel?" Seraphine asked. "Hungry," Ilara admitted. The hunger was overwhelming, a gnawing emptiness that demanded to be filled. "Naturally. Come, I've prepared someone for your first feeding. It's important to do it right." She led Ilara to an adjacent chamber where a human man sat bound and blindfolded in a chair. He was middle-aged, soft around the middle, and his heartbeat filled the room like thunder. "As a criminal," Seraphine explained, "condemned to death anyway, consider it mercy that his end serves a higher purpose. Take what you need." Ilara approached, drawn by instinct and hunger. The man's pulse called to her, a song her new nature couldn't resist. She could hear the blood moving through his veins, could smell the richness of it, could almost taste. She stopped, inches from his throat. "I can't," she said. "Can't or won't?" Seraphine's voice held a dangerous edge. "He's terrified. I can smell it, the fear sweat, the adrenaline. You said vampire law prohibits feeding from the unwilling. He's bound and blindfolded. That's not consent. He's condemned. His will is forfeit." "Then so am I." Ilara stepped back, "because I won't start my existence as a vampire by breaking the laws I was taught to respect. Find someone willing, or I'll starve before I become what you want me to be." She felt the sire bond flare, Seraphine's will pressing against her own, commanding obedience. But that strange resistance in Ilara's mind held firm, deflecting the compulsion like water off glass. Seraphine's eyes widened. Impossible! The bond should be absolute for the first century at least. How are you resisting? "I don't know, but I am." Ilara met her gaze steadily. "You wanted a weapon, Lady Seraphine, but Cassian spent 13 years teaching me to think for myself. That doesn't disappear just because I'm vampire now." For a moment, Seraphine simply stared. Then she did something unexpected. She dismissed the condemned man with a gesture and began to laugh. "Oh, this is rich. I fight a war, destroy my relationship with the Northern Covenant, transform you at great personal cost, and you're still loyal to Cassian's teachings?" Her laughter subsided into something more contemplative. "Very well. I'll find willing donors. They exist. Humans who crave vampire attention, who offer themselves freely. Will that satisfy your moral standards?" "Yes." "Then consider it done. But, Ilara, understand this. Your resistance to the sire bond won't last forever. And even if it does, you're still mine by law. I transformed you. I can compel you to remain in my territory, to fight in my battles, to serve my interests. The bond may be weak, but the law is ironclad." "I understand." But even as she said it, Ilara was planning. Cassian had taught her strategy along with ethics. If the sire bond was weakened, if her will remained her own, then perhaps the prophecy wasn't about being a weapon after all. Perhaps it was about being a force that could unite the covenants through choice rather than compulsion. She just had to survive long enough to make that choice meaningful. The following weeks tested every lesson Ilara had learned. Seraphine kept her close, introducing her to the Eastern Covenant's hierarchy, assigning her tasks that ranged from diplomatic escort to enforcement of Covenant law. And always, Seraphine watched for signs of the sire bond strengthening, for Ilara's will to bend toward obedience. It never did. "You're an anomaly," Mira said during a clandestine visit. Seraphine allowed contact with Thornwood vampires, confident in her legal claim. "The bond should have you worshipping her by now. Instead, you're barely more connected than a human employee." They sat in a garden within Seraphine's estate, speaking in careful undertones that even vampire hearing would struggle to catch. "How's Cassian?" Ilara asked, not for the first time. "Destroying himself slowly. He blames himself for your transformation, for not fighting harder. He's withdrawn from Covenant leadership, barely leaves his study." Mira's eyes were sympathetic. "He loves you, Ilara. I never thought I'd see the alpha brought low by human emotion, but there it is." "I love him too," Ilara admitted. "But I made my choice. Thornwood is safe. That matters more than personal happiness. Does it? Because from where I'm standing, everyone's miserable. You're trapped in the Eastern Covenant, and Seraphine is planning something big. She's been meeting with representatives from the Southern Syndicate and the Western Court. Whatever she's scheming, you're at the center of it." Ilara had noticed the same thing. Increased security around her quarters, more frequent summons to meetings where treaty language was discussed, references to consolidation and unified Covenant structure. Seraphine was building towards something, and Ilara's role in it remained frustratingly unclear. "I need information," Ilara said. "Can you get word to Dante? Tell him to investigate the Hunter Alliance Seraphine mentioned. Something about that bothers me. Why would vampire hunters ally with a vampire, even temporarily?" "I'll try." Mira rose to leave, then paused. "Ilara, if things go badly here, if you need extraction, Thornwood would risk war to get you back. You know that, right?"
"I know. That's why I won't ask. Too many have died already for my sake."
After Mira left, Ilara remained in the garden, testing the limits of her new abilities. She'd discovered she could move with vampire speed, heal from injuries in minutes, and sense the emotions of humans and vampires alike through some form of empathic perception. But she'd also discovered limitations. Silver burned her skin, sunlight felt like being slowly cooked, and the hunger, while manageable with willing donors, never truly went away.
"Admiring your prison?"
Seraphine's voice came from behind her.
"Appreciating the beauty of my cage."
Ilara corrected. "There's a difference." "Is there?" Seraphine settled onto a bench, gesturing for Ilara to join her. "You still see yourself as trapped. But Ilara, you're the most valuable vampire in existence. The prophecy, the rare bloodline, the resistance to sire bonds, you're unique." That makes you powerful, not imprisoned. Power without freedom is just a gilded chain. Philosophy from Cassian, no doubt. Seraphine's smile was sharp. He always did prefer abstract ideals to practical reality. Let me offer a different perspective. I could have killed you 13 years ago, eliminated the prophecy before it became a threat. Cassian could have transformed you himself, binding you to him completely. The hunters could have assassinated you at any point. But you're a live vampire and relatively autonomous. That's not imprisonment, that's victory by any reasonable measure. Then why do I still feel like a pawn? Because you're young and still thinking like a human. Vampires play long games, Ilara. Decades, centuries of maneuvering toward goals that mortal minds can barely comprehend. You've been vampire for mere weeks. Give it time. Your perspective will shift. Ilara doubted that, but kept silent. Instead, she asked the question that had been bothering her since the transformation. "What do you really want from me?" Seraphine's expression turned calculating. "Honest answer? I want to unite the covenants under a single authority. The current system, multiple alphas, competing territories, constant political maneuvering, it's inefficient. Vampire kind could be so much more if we worked together instead of against each other. But unity requires power, and power requires leverage. You, my dear, are leverage incarnate. How? The prophecy says you'll either unite or destroy the covenants. I intend to make you the former, the symbol of a new order, where old rivalries are set aside in favor of collective strength. With you as the visible face of unity, transformed and supposedly bound to me, other alphas will have incentive to negotiate rather than fight. And if they don't, then the prophecy's darker interpretation comes true, and destruction follows. But I'm an optimist. Seraphine's smile was all teeth. I believe we can build something magnificent from the ashes of the old order, with you at the center, whether you want to be or not. The casual admission of intent to use Alara as a symbol regardless of her consent crystallized something in Alara's mind. She would never be free as long as the prophecy hung over her. The only way to escape being a pawn was to stop being predictable, to make choices that served neither Seraphine's ambition nor Cassian's protection. She needed to become something neither of them expected, her own player in the game. That night, Alara broke into Seraphine's private study, an action that should have been impossible given the magical wards and physical security. But her anomalous nature seemed to slip through protections designed for normal vampires. She found what she was looking for in a locked drawer, correspondence between Seraphine and the Hunter Guild. The letters revealed a conspiracy more twisted than anyone suspected. The Hunters hadn't just agreed to support Seraphine's claim on Alara, they'd agreed to help her orchestrate a controlled war between covenants, one that would weaken all parties enough that Seraphine could step in as the unifying authority. And the price? Once unity was achieved, Seraphine would deliver specific vampires to the Hunters for elimination. The list included Cassian's name. Alara's hands shook as she read the final letter, dated just 2 days ago. Proceed with Phase 3. Provoke Northern Covenant into aggressive action. Ensure Alpha Cassian commits personally to battle. Elimination during combat will appear as casualty of war. They were going to kill him, use Alara as bait to draw him out, then murder him while he tried to save her. She was replacing the letters when a voice behind her said, "I wondered when you'd look." Seraphine stood in the doorway, no surprise on her face. "You've been less subtle than you think, dear girl." I've been watching your growing independence, your careful questions, your friendship with Mira. I knew you'd eventually investigate. You're planning to murder Cassian, Alara said flatly. I'm planning to eliminate the greatest obstacle to Covenant unity. There's a difference. Seraphine moved into the room, closing the door behind her. Cassian is 500 years old, rooted in old ways and old conflicts. He'll never accept a unified Covenant structure because it would mean surrendering his autonomy. So yes, he has to die. It's unfortunate, but necessary. I won't let you. You don't have a choice. The provocation has already begun. Tomorrow night, Thornwood will receive word that I'm holding you prisoner, that I've violated the terms of our agreement. Cassian will come for you, because despite centuries of survival instinct, he loves you more than he loves logic. And when he does, the Hunters will be waiting. Rage filled Alara, hot and consuming. You said Thornwood would remain free. You gave your word. I said they would remain autonomous, and they will after Cassian's death, when a new alpha takes his place, one more amenable to negotiation. Seraphine's expression was almost pitying. You made your sacrifice for nothing, Ilara. The moment you agreed to come with me, Cassian's fate was sealed. At least your transformation wasn't wasted. You'll be the symbol of the new order, the bridge between old and new. That's more than most get. The sire bond flared then, Seraphine's will crashing against Ilara's mind like a tidal wave. Accept this. Stop fighting. Obey. But Ilara's resistance held, that strange quality in her nature deflecting the compulsion. And in that moment of effort, while Seraphine was focused on enforcing obedience, Ilara acted. She grabbed the silver letter opener from the desk and drove it into Seraphine's shoulder. Silver burned vampires from the inside, disrupting their healing and causing agony disproportionate to the actual wound. Seraphine screamed, staggering back, and Ilara ran. She made it to the window, crashed through glass, and fell 3 stories to the garden below. Her vampire body absorbed the impact, though pain exploded through her legs. She forced herself to move, using speed she barely understood to race toward the estate's perimeter. Alarms sounded behind her, voices shouted orders. She felt the sire bond pulling, Seraphine's fury driving the compulsion to return, to submit, to accept punishment. Ilara gritted her teeth and ran faster. She made it to the wall, scaled it with inhuman strength, and dropped into the forest beyond. Behind her, the Eastern Covenant mobilized for pursuit, but Ilara had one advantage. She knew these woods. Cassian had brought her here years ago, teaching her the paths that led back to Thornwood. She'd memorized them, never thinking she'd need them like this. She ran through the night, pushing her new body to limits she didn't know existed. Dawn was approaching. She could feel it in her bones, that instinctive dread of sunlight that came with vampire nature. She needed shelter, needed to reach Thornwood before the sun forced her to ground. She almost made it. 50 yards from Thornwood's walls, as the sky was lightening to gray, hunters emerged from the trees. 5 of them, armed with silver weapons and wooden stakes, moving with the confidence of people who'd killed vampires before. "The prophecy girl," the leader said, checking her face against a portrait. "Bonus catch. Lady Seraphine will pay extra for your return." "She's the one who sent you after Cassian," Ilara said, buying time. "You know that, right? You're not hunters anymore. You're assassins for a vampire overlord." "We're realists. The world's changing. Better to be on the winning side." "There are no winning sides when you betray your principles." The leader shrugged. "Philosophy is for people who can afford it."
"Now, you coming quietly, or do we do this the hard way?" Ilara answered by attacking. She'd trained with Dante for years, but human combat training didn't fully translate to vampire capabilities. She was faster than the hunters expected, stronger than they'd prepared for. She broke the first one's arm, sent the second flying into a tree hard enough to crack ribs. But there were 5 of them. They had silver weapons, and Ilara was newly transformed, still learning what her body could do. A silver blade scored across her back, burning like acid. She screamed, stumbled, and a wooden stake punched through her shoulder, missing her heart by inches. Pain exploded through her entire being. She went down, blood pooling beneath her, vision graying. The hunters closed in for the kill. Then Cassian was there. He moved like death personified, a blur of elegant violence. The hunters didn't stand a chance. He tore through them with casual efficiency, not bothering to kill, just dismantling them as threats in seconds. Then he was kneeling beside Alara, pulling the stake from her shoulder with surprising gentleness. "You stubborn, brilliant, impossible girl," he murmured, his hands pressing against her wounds. "What have you done?" "Saved you," Ilara gasped. "Seraphine, trap, hunters waiting." "I know. Mira intercepted their communications an hour ago. We've been preparing defenses." His eyes met hers, and she saw the depth of emotion he usually kept locked away. "But you shouldn't be here. You're supposed to be safe in the Eastern Covenant." "Safe? She was going to use me as bait to kill you," Ilara gasped. "The agreement was a lie. She's working with the hunters to eliminate every alpha who won't submit to her authority. I saw the letters, the plans. Cassian, she wants to rule all the covenants, and she needs you dead to do it." Dawn was breaking properly now, sunlight filtering through the trees. Ilara felt it like poison on her skin, burning even through the forest's shade. "Shelter," Cassian said urgently. He lifted her. She weighed nothing to him and raced toward Thornwood. They made it inside just as full sunlight claimed the forest, and Cassian carried her down to the manor's crypts where darkness reigned eternal. He laid her on a bed in his personal chamber. She'd never been here before, and worked to clean and dress her wounds. Silver poisoning healed slowly even for vampires, and the stake wound would take days to fully close. "You broke your agreement with Seraphine," Cassian said as he worked. "Attacked her and fled. Do you understand what that means? She can demand your return by law. She can claim you violated the Transformation Compact. She has legal justification to take you by force. I know, but I couldn't let her murder you. So instead, you've made yourself fugitive and started a war." His hands stilled on her bandages. "Ilara, why? Why sacrifice everything for me?" "You know why." The words hung between them, loaded with 13 years of history, with gratitude and love and desperation. Cassian closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were full of the vulnerability he'd shown only once before. "I can't offer you what you want," he said quietly. "You're already bound to Seraphine as sire. Even if the bond is weak, it exists. We could never be together as vampires are meant to be together." "I don't care about meant to be." Ilara caught his hand. "I care about what is, what's always been, is that you saw me when I was nothing, claimed me when I was worthless, and taught me that I had value beyond survival. That's love, Cassian. I don't need a perfect bond or vampire tradition. I just need you to stop pushing me away because you're afraid. I'm not afraid. You're terrified. 500 years of existence, and you're terrified of what you feel for a girl you rescued from market steps. Because if you admit it, if you act on it, you become vulnerable in ways you haven't been for centuries." She pulled him closer despite the pain it caused. "But I'm already vulnerable. I was vulnerable the moment I placed my bloody hand in yours. So please, just this once, be vulnerable with me." The last of his restraint shattered. He kissed her with the desperation of someone who'd been holding back for far too long, and Ilara kissed him back with equal intensity despite her injuries. It wasn't perfect. Vampire kisses never were, all sharp edges and dangerous potential. But it was real, and it was theirs, and it was everything she'd wanted since she was old enough to name the feeling. When they finally broke apart, Cassian rested his forehead against hers. "We're going to war with the Eastern Covenant, possibly with the Hunters, possibly with every vampire authority in the realm. You understand that? What you've done, choosing me over Seraphine, it's going to have consequences that ripple for decades. Then we face them together." "Together," he agreed, the words sounding like a vow. Above them, in the manor proper, preparations for war were already underway. But in that moment, in the darkness of the crypts, Two people who'd found each other across impossible circumstances simply held on, knowing that whatever came next, they'd face it as something more than Alpha and Ward, more than guardian and rescued child. They'd face it as equals who'd chosen each other. Prophecy and politics be damned. The war came at midnight 3 days later. Seraphine arrived with the entire Eastern Covenant at her back. Over 200 vampires, plus mercenary hunters and magical support from hired witches. They surrounded Thornwood, a siege force that should have overwhelmed the Northern Covenant's mere 80 vampires.